Hey guys, welcome back to the Spin. My name's Katie,
I'm Shafalika.
I'm Kevin.
I'm Jonathan.
and today we'll be discussing the 2020 presidential election. So Kevin, as the ballots continue to be counted, President Trump continues to cast doubt on the results, stating that many of the votes being counted are illegal despite there being no claims for this. What kind of precedent does this set, and how does this reflect on the state of democracy as a whole?
I mean, here's the thing when it comes to stuff like that is that when you have evidence for this happening, you go to court, you bring the evidence to court, and you present it. Well, first off, there's no evidence, so I just want to kind of just get that out of the way. There's no evidence for these claims to begin with, but if there was evidence, you take it to court, you go into a court battle, and you deal with it there. You don't use the bully pulpit of the presidency to attack your political enemies, because because you're using an institution in a very anti-democratic way, trying to disenfranchise voters. So quite frankly, it is a worrying precedent to set, because you're because when you're in that room that the president is in, the press room, you are the president of the United States. You are not speaking as Donald J. Trump, Republican candidate for president of the United States. You're speaking as Donald J. Trump, president of the United States. That's a worrying precedent, and hopefully it's a one-off thing that will die after this election in terms of a precedent. But who knows? Hopefully we won't ever see that ever again. So.
Well, I think that the impact it has on our country is inevitably going to be negligible. First of all, it is perfectly legal to attempt lawsuits post-election. People do that in all kinds of elections. For example, Rick Scott's opponent here in Florida, when he lost to Rick Scott, he filed 25 lawsuits, which eventually went nowhere. The whole point of providing what is worrisome, in my opinion, is that President Trump is laying these accusations out without showing the proof, without having hard evidence. And all of these ballot counting offices have cameras. They have inside the building Democratic, Republican, and independent observers watching these ballots being counted. Yesterday in Michigan, I watched Fox News where they had a live broadcast where a judge was hearing one of the cases that I believe was brought up in Michigan. And the judge kept saying, "Explain to me how your case is not hearsay. Explain." And they said, "Well, this woman who is our client, she said she saw something." Again, hearsay is not attainable in a court of law. You have to have actual proof. And all across the country, in Georgia, in Pennsylvania, in Arizona, we are seeing people showing up to the ballot counting offices, and some of them are armed, such as in Phoenix, and this is a viable threat. So when President Trump spoke about how people were putting cardboard up in Detroit, there's a problem that they were trying to protect the safety. The people who are legally allowed to watch votes being counted were inside already. So I think that what the lasting implication of these lawsuits will be negligible to our democracy, and really what they're going to do is set the tone for the type of president leaving the office that Trump will choose to be. He can be graceful, he can respect American democracy, he can do the morally ethical thing of providing a concession speech, or he can just bow out gracefully. Perhaps in the last 3 months of his presidency, there will be something positive, maybe a COVID vaccine, that he can leave on a high note. But right now, what he's doing is he's digging himself deeper and deeper into a hole, and America isn't gonna fall in that hole with him. There are already Republicans coming out and saying, this is not appropriate for a president to do. But overall, America's not going to get hurt by these lawsuits. There's not going to be a lawsuit in any of these states or situations that will overturn any of these voter counts so far.
Honestly, he's doing exactly what a lot of people have expected him to do. It was already speculation he was not going to respectfully, bow out. He's not going to respectfully and gracefully bow out if he were to lose. But my suspicions is this: when it comes down to how the election has been conducted and his reaction upon the election, and correct me if I'm wrong, and Kevin, if you don't mind, kind of helping me out on this one, is there a possibility? And I do wholeheartedly believe President Trump knows exactly what he's doing. He can literally say something that does not make sense, and there's millions of people that will rally behind what he's saying. There's millions of people. That's been proven so many times, time and time, on and on again, in every different scenario. Even if there's no evidence to support his argument, even if something is considered fake, if something he considers fake news to be fake news, everyone is going to scream fake news. So he can rally people behind his words. But Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong. There's a possibility that if this doesn't go a certain way, as it has traditionally been in the past, it can possibly lead to the Supreme Court, correct?
Well, yeah. And this is how I think it works. I believe this is how it works. Is that for the Supreme Court is kind of like an appeals court in a way. Like to go to the Supreme Court, you have to have a lower court first accept your case, and then it can go to the Supreme Court. But yeah, it's possible. In my opinion, I think that the accepting a frivolous case like that would kind of delegitimize the court. So I don't think the court's going to fall on its sword for Donald Trump, even though it has a 6-3 majority. That's my opinion, at least.
The fact that it's even possible is the fact that I think he's planning on in the long game. How many Supreme Court justices has he personally had a hand in trying to put in the court?
I think he's had Amy Coney Barrett, Neil Gorsuch, and
Brett Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, if it does in fact indeed goes to the Supreme Court, what he's probably planning is for this possibly to be in his favor. Maybe this is conspiracy theorist in me saying this, but the fact that it is a possibility, I feel like that is something that he probably would want to do. Even though it's highly unlikely, but the fact that it's still a possibility, there's still a chance. Now, granted, I do believe that he should just bow out gracefully, but what I've learned, honestly, within the last 4 years of being under his presidency, of being throughout his term, there's nothing graceful about this president. And maybe that sounds like I'm being biased, but honestly, I'm just calling a spade a spade. Either way, I feel like, honestly, he wants it to go, though he wants to incite or rally as many people behind him as possible so it can get to that position and be like, hey, I got you. 3 of you guys in here under my influence. You owe me. That's
a very interesting point to bring up. Before it goes to the United Supreme Court, it does have to pass through the state Supreme Court. And you have to, in many ways, wait for the count to be finished before you even get there. So if it won't reduce or overturn a vote record in favor of the other client of the President Trump, then the chances the U.S. Supreme Court won't even see the cases.
That has been, of course, I agree with you, but there have been analysts that's actually ran that, I want to say conspiracy, but ran that theory. But of course, hopefully this is just the fact that the president of the United States is making a mockery of the same system that put him into office in the first place. It's laughable considering this was already anticipated. There was over 6 million mail-in ballots, I've heard, which is basically 80% more, the 80% increase than 2016. So this was to be expected. Even Bernie Sanders predicted this himself. So granted, you can't say that some votes are illegal and some votes are legal. That's just not how it works.
So Shivalaka, both President Trump and Biden have given various speeches throughout, the past week. What impact do you think these speeches had on the state of democracy? And also, what do you think the tonal differences are in both of these candidates' speeches?
I I think that's a great question. On election night, both President Trump and Vice President Biden made speeches, and I believe Biden went first and said that we need to continue counting votes, that we all need to be patient. Every vote matters, every vote will be counted. And on that night, he wasn't looking too good. There were places like Georgia where Trump had a 300,000 lead, Pennsylvania, Trump had a 600,000 lead. Biden didn't really mention any of that. What he did was try and act in a calming way and say, look, we have to wait. The votes are coming in, they will continue to come in, and let's be patient. Trump came in that night and said, I essentially won. I won Michigan, I won Pennsylvania, I'm winning all over the place. I'm the winner, we're done here. And also, he was very antagonistic that night, but he was getting ready to basically assume that he had won. And many of his voters came out on election day. So the instant ballots that were read and counted and tallied were many Trump supporters. He told them for months, do not vote by mail, don't trust the mail, the post office sucks. You have got to show up in person, the red wave. That was what they did. They listened. And Trump has gotten the most Republican votes of anybody in Republican Party history. However, it is several days later, and when Trump came out yesterday, I believe his staff at the White House urged him not to speak on Wednesday, which Biden did speak. That was his second speech where he addressed a little bit of how COVID was important and that he spent all day that day in COVID meetings. He also said we need to continue to be patient. And in a way, Biden's speech on Wednesday was a response to Trump's late night speech on early Wednesday morning at around 2 a.m., I believe. And Trump didn't speak. Yesterday, when Trump came out and spoke again, that's when he started reiterating this theory he's had for months, forecasting that the ballots are fraudulent, that there are late, illegal ballots, that people are theoretically putting in the mail after the election day, and now they're going to count that ballot and it's wrong, it's illegal, it's late. He is using language against the American democratic process. And that was his speech yesterday. I honestly think that Trump has been forecasting for months this big election upheaval because it was, like John said, a contingency plan for drawing out this election and maybe getting it all the way to a 6-3 US Supreme Court vote. Honestly, Trump is the weatherman to his own storm. And I think it's becoming apparently clear that these speeches and tones are completely different. Biden does speak to the unifying people, being a president for all Americans, which is the point of a president. And Trump is just all about these lawsuits and fraudulent claims. He is not worried about the huge spike of COVID cases, 120,000 new cases Wednesday, 100,000 Wednesday, 120 yesterday, and Lord knows how many today. Trump is not addressing any of that. He's only in it for himself, and that's very apparent. And I think people are waking up when you put the two speeches side by side.
I mean, the impact that I think that they had is that I felt like Biden had a very common, very count every vote kind of theme to it, and that's important because we need to count every vote. That's how democracy works. You don't just count the votes that vote for you and then just say, hey, that's what they do in unfortunately Belarus or any other illiberal democracy. So basically, I think that was great, but I feel like Trump's speech was not only not common, it was insightful. It was trying to incite people to unrest. It was trying to incite people to lose faith in the democratic process. And as I mentioned earlier, if you have evidence of voter fraud, you take it to the courts, you ask for a recount, but you don't use the bully pulpit of the presidency to bash the very foundations of our institutions, because that's, I mean, isn't that what, you know, countries like Iran and North Korea and China and Russia, isn't that what they want? Isn't that what they want? Isn't that what don't they want the president to go on TV to say that American institutions don't work, that there's fraud, that we're corrupt? I mean, this is exactly what, you know, those countries want. And you can't tell me that someone's a patriot and then say, well, I'm going to go and bash American institutions on US TV and undermine faith in our institutions. Like, it's just a level of cognitive dissonance that I think some people have, that I just think it's, to be honest, kind of ridiculous. Like, I know it sounds very biased, but just like John said, I'm just calling a spade a spade.
A hit dog will holler. So, and he's been hollering a lot in all caps on Twitter. That you can see is, honestly, he knows his seat is up for grabs. He knows that he's in danger of losing the powers that he has came accustomed to. There's no more taxpayer golf trips. That's coming to an end. There's, you know, you can't, like Kevin said, you can't make fun of the same system that put you into office in the first place. You know, you can't make fun of the same system that gave you this opportunity, that gave you 4 years of opportunity to do something great. And I understand, in a sense, if this president is not as mature as we probably would want to give him credit for, you're not going to back the people that don't have your back. Granted, that would be okay if you weren't the president. If you weren't the president of everyone, not just whoever accepts you. You know, so there's a night and day difference. One is speaking to a diverse audience. Another is speaking to people that just purely support him. And granted, if you look at it from a macro perspective, you're going to lose if that's the case. You're going to lose like that because you're not trying to get any business cannot grow without promoters. That's just universal. Any business cannot grow without promoters. Unless you expand your audience, unless you expand your influence, you will just keep selling to the same people over and over and over again. There's no growth. So, granted, if Biden is let's just say this, like, let's play devil's advocate. Even if Biden is using the coronavirus as a channel, as a way to kind of channel in more votes on his side, if people were on the fence, that's still a good strategy on his part, because he's ringing in people that probably didn't believe in him in the first place. Because a lot of people are not. There's been statistics that prove that people are not satisfied with the president's handling of the virus. And then they're calling the mockery of people that may have died prior to their ballot being received in the mail, saying that they don't count because they don't have a pulse. Like, their voice, like you've been saying all throughout the presidency, all throughout this entire election, that every voice should be heard. If somebody cast that ballot, then it has to be heard. They lived an American, they died an American. Let that vote be their legacy from how they move on. That is not being acknowledged by this current president. And I'm just leave it at that.
All right, well, I think that's all the time we have for today, guys. Thank you so much. My name's Katie.
I'm Shafalika.
I'm Kevin.
I'm Jonathan.
And we'll see you next week for another episode of The Spin. Thank you.